time, baby.
You are listening to Solomonster Sounds Off.
It's such good shit.
Mama Monster.
Conquered! I'm home!
You like threatening a woman?
Your behavior just hasn't been very oozy.
Oh my God, we're only an hour in.
Eric Bischoff is an idiot.
We have 2 more hours of this.
Maybe the single stupidest idiot that ever got into wrestling.
Who writes this stuff? Bruce?
Come over here and threaten me?
I'm the Solomonster, damn it. This is episode 779 of the Solomonster Sounds Off for Sunday, October 23rd, 2022. I am the Solomonster. Busy night of baseball and wrestling last night. You could not have 2 more different games than the Yankees against the Astros and the Phillies against the Padres. One was a total bore, and the other is what I love about playoff baseball. I have no love for the Phillies, but that was a hell of a win last night. I can call a spade a spade. That was a hell of a win last night. At least they know how to win. I can think of a couple of New York teams who got amnesia and forgot. Although none worse than the Dodgers, who won 111 games this year with the highest payroll in baseball and still got bounced out of the division series. Now I don't feel so bad anymore. But then there was Halloween Havoc, and I nailed every one of my predictions, and predictable as it may have been, it was still a good show overall. You know, you watch the opener, you watch the main event, and you could pretty much leave the rest. There was nothing in the middle of the show that anybody needs to go out of their way to watch. But I've got my review all teed up with some notes from the post-show media call with Shawn Michaels. He had a couple of interesting things to say. I've got news for you on what discussions took place between WWE and AEW when it came to getting Billy Gunn for Raw for that DX reunion a few weeks ago. Of course, it didn't work out. I've got King of the Ring news, possibly making a comeback as a pay-per-view. My sense of the Bray Wyatt stuff that we saw this week, having had the chance to go back and rewatch some of the stuff from Friday night. A huge update on CM Punk's status with AEW. I've got a lot to say about that. I've got a Jeff Hardy update for you. There's a name you haven't heard in a while. A recap of the latest Tales from the Territories episode on the AWA. They had Ken Patera on as part of the panel, and they asked him about the infamous McDonald's incident. And yes, he is as full of shit now as he has always been when it comes to his version of events. It's hilarious. So a lot to get into this week. First, though, I want to extend my condolences to Kevin Nash and his family on the death of his son, Tristan. Tristan has appeared on his father's Click This podcast many times. In fact, he was just on the show this week. He was helping out on the production side because Kevin, I'm sure, is not the most technologically inclined person. But Tristan was a musician. He was getting ready to perform at some music festival this weekend, so he popped on to talk about it for a few minutes, and he looked to be in good spirits. And then on Scott Hall's birthday, of all days, Scott Hall would have turned 64 on Thursday. The family announced that Tristan had passed away, issued a statement saying, on behalf of Kevin and Tamara Nash, I have to unfortunately report that their son Tristan Nash has tragically passed away at the age of 26. Tristan recently started working on Kevin's new podcast, and the two enjoyed their time together. The Nash family asks if you could please respect their privacy during this time. No parent should ever have to bury their child, but to lose your best friend in the same year, and then on Scott's birthday to lose your own son, I can't even begin to imagine what he must be going through right now. Hell on earth. So that broke my heart to hear that, and I hope he's got a good support system around him is really all I can say. Just awful. I want to thank everybody who has made a PayPal donation this week to the show. You guys rock. I appreciate the support. You can always go to thesolomonster.com. And at the top of the link tree is the PayPal button. $10 or more will get you a nickname and a shout out here for Roll Call. I want to say thank you to the Portland pop star Paul Hamilton, Night Stalker, Nayef Al-Safar, Big B, Brian Pacera, Out of Control, Cody Thomas, Killshot, Keith Hart, Beast Mode, Brock Joseph, Velvet Revolver, Robert Murray, the Chicago Slayer, Willie Eichard, the Diamond Dallas Dance Machine, Harrison Soap, New York Punk, Arnold Modesto, John Raging Mad Riffle, still angry as always, Shin Superkick Akuma, Wicked Fist, Sebastian Drea, Sebastian, thank you, Ms. Madness, Michelle Mills, And also, Sherrod Big Daddy Boyd. I want to say thank you to him. I want to say thank you to Jessica as well. And Ainsley Bulletproof Bosted. He's over in England. He just turned 36 years old. He's been part of the Sound Off family now for 9 years. And on his birthday, he wanted to spread some of the wealth around. So Ainsley, happy birthday. I'm proud to have you as a fan for that long. I thank you for the support. Triple H tested positive for COVID on Monday, and he was not present backstage at Monday Night Raw. He was at home following COVID protocol, as he was on Friday for SmackDown. But he is said to be feeling fine. He was on the phone with people at the shows, making sure things ran smoothly. Road Dogg was there in person. He was running the show in his place. At least on Monday he was. The same Road Dogg who less than 3 months ago was on Busted Open Radio begging Tony Khan for a job. And the same Road Dogg who was on his Oh You Didn't Know podcast this week, revealing that Billy Gunn wanted to be part of the DX reunion on Raw 2 weeks ago, and as late as the day before, thought that he was going to be able to do it. He said, "It broke my heart, and I believe it broke his too. In all actuality, Hunter was not happy about it either. Shawn and X-Pac weren't either. We wanted the band all back together. China was there in spirit. That didn't happen. From what I understand, and I'm not in those inner circles anymore, and for my sanity, rightfully so, I don't know the exact reason, but I was told everything that we could do was done, and we couldn't come together. During the day prior, I texted him. I said, hey, are you going to be able to make it? Have you found out any answers yet? He said, yes, I'm in. And I was like, oh my God, that's awesome. Literally before I landed at home, I found out he was not in. I texted him back and he wasn't happy either. It just didn't work. I understand that WWE and AEW were not huge fans of each other from a business standpoint. It was a big deal, and I feel like he got ripped off and didn't live it with us. I'm sorry for that. I know he is too. Billy did an interview with Sports Illustrated, and he was asked about the whole thing, and he said, of course, I would have liked to have been there, but I understand that I work for another company. He says, it was a collective decision. I'm not putting it on anyone. I'm not sour about it. We're two separate companies, and it just didn't work out. So that's the nice diplomatic answer there from Daddy Ass. Now, per Dave Meltzer in this week's Observer, WWE and AEW did have talks, and it did not involve any money being exchanged. All Tony Khan asked for, and just keep in mind who is likely feeding this information to Dave on this, Tony agreed to it, but he asked that on the air, on Monday Night Raw, they acknowledge that Billy was from AEW, or thank AEW for allowing him to appear, some such language. But there had to be some kind of wording that AEW allowed him to appear. Not unlike how WWE mentioned Impact Wrestling when they had Mickie James as the Impact Knockouts champion in this year's Royal Rumble match. So, of course, WWE doesn't consider Impact competition the way that they do AEW, so the two situations are not exactly the same. At that point, WWE stalled in giving them a yes or a no answer, and at the very last minute, they would not agree to their request. Sean Ross Sapp on Fightful Select said the talks were far enough along that WWE booked travel arrangements for Billy to come to Brooklyn for the show, and they even considered putting an AEW logo somewhere on the screen, maybe in the lower third, during the segment. But at the last minute, they decided against it. Maybe they didn't want a building full of scissor me daddy ass chants in Brooklyn. Maybe that's what it was. Would it have been cool to see him on the show? Yes, it would have been cool. But why would... Here's my issue with this. Why would Tony Khan even entertain the idea when the last time he allowed Billy on their television, Triple H called AEW a pissant company? Not only that, but he had a meltdown at the Brawl Out media scrum long after CM Punk took his muffins and went to the back, where he was sitting there at the dais, he was sitting at the table and he's talking about how badly WWE treated him. I was nice to them, they weren't nice to me. He was all bent out of shape about them running two shows Labor Day weekend, knowing full well that they run their all-out pay-per-view that weekend. You could tell how offended he was by that. It's like a personal affront to him. He compared himself to Jim Crockett that weekend and how Vince McMahon tried to fuck over Crockett with all the shit that he pulled back in the day, booking Survivor Series opposite Starrcade and then the first Royal Rumble against the Bunkhouse Stampede. He's out there comparing himself to Jim Crockett. Now I know how it feels. Between that and all of the reports of contract tampering, he was so mad. He sat there at the scrum and he said, "I'm not going to sit back and take this fucking shit." Those were his exact words. This is the president and CEO of the company sitting there saying this. A month later, he's going to be like, "Oh yeah, sure, no problem. Billy can be on the show. Billy can go play with his friends." Get the hell out of here. Are you kidding me with this? Tell Billy he's grounded, take the scissors away from him, send him to his room, and tell the other parents to go fuck themselves. He never should have taken their call to begin with, if that's how he really feels. Carl Anderson will not be defending his never openweight championship November 5th at the New Japan show in Osaka after all of the wondering, is he going to be there, is he not going to be there, is WWE going to let him work the show? It's not happening because he was booked for Crown Jewel in Saudi Arabia that same day, tagging with Luke Gallows and AJ Styles. They're going to be taking on the Judgment Day. The announcement was made on Raw Monday night, and there's just no chance that he could have worked both shows anyway because it's something like a 15-hour flight between Osaka and Riyadh. And in a video posted to Anderson's Instagram, he and Gallows were clearly in character, explaining why he won't be defending the title. Gallows said, "New Japan Pro Wrestling, few questions. Are we the OG Bullet Club? Yes. Are we the world-famous Good Brothers? Yes. Are we repping OC on Monday Night Raw? Yes. And do all bookings still go through the big LG when it comes to Bright Lights, when it comes to the Good Brothers? Yes, they do. You guys announced Bright Lights, the Machine Gun, Carl Anderson for a match on November 5th. Guess what? We're a little double booked because you didn't run it through me. So he ain't coming. We're not coming unless it's our time. Unless it's on our time." And Anderson then spoke. He said, "New Japan Pro Wrestling, listen, I love what you've done for the Good Brothers through these years. But let me tell you something. I am the greatest never openweight champion of all time. I only work when the lights are bright, and November 5th, we ain't coming. We'll come on our time. The Machine Gun will tell you when I am coming to defend my championship." And Rocky Romero, who is the liaison between New Japan and a lot of the foreign talents, he's been the bridge between New Japan and AEW since they started working together. He posted a comment in response to the video saying, "Fuck you, dude, return the title." They're all clearly working here. If I had a guess, it ends with Anderson working the Tokyo Dome in January. This is my guess here. He will not work a match for New Japan until January 4th. And that is where he will drop the championship. Now, maybe he told WWE before he signed that he wanted to work the Dome show, and they said, fine, but that's the only show you're going to work, and that's a much bigger show than the one next month. If I had to choose between the two, I would say, yeah, I'll work the Tokyo Dome and not, some random show in Osaka. Because if this was a shoot, New Japan would have already stripped him of the title. And I also just cannot imagine that Anderson would fuck them over and would fuck over Rocky Romero like this and then be cutting kayfabe promos on them. Right? I mean, anything's possible, but you talk about burning a bridge. If this were real, you talk about burning a bridge. That would be like torching the bridge and then dropping a nuclear warhead on it. WWE needed them to work the Saudi show. They're turning it into an angle. Vic Joseph on NXT last week, because the Good Brothers made a cameo, he even acknowledged on TV that Carl Anderson is still a champion in Japan. He didn't say New Japan, but he said he's a champion in Japan right now. And like I said, I think he'll be allowed to work the Dome show and drop the belt the right way. I have to think he would have cleared all of this with WWE before he put pen to paper. If he had any shred of respect for Gedo in New Japan, then that was already taken care of before he signed. It looks like the King of the Ring could be making a comeback under Triple H, who himself is a former King of the Ring winner. As reported in this week's Observer, the chatter is that King of the Ring could return as its own pay-per-view again, but with King of the Ring and the Queen's Crown all at the same time. So close, yet so far. I've wanted King of the Ring back as a pay-per-view for a long time. The last one they did was 20 years ago, which is the one that Brock Lesnar won. And it didn't do great numbers on pay-per-view, so Vince McMahon made the decision to drop it. and they've dusted it off a handful of times since then as a gimmick for TV. Now they can make it a Peacock special, and they don't have to worry about how many buys the show gets. They get paid the same either way. They've already got their guaranteed Peacock money. I would love to see them do the entire tournament in one night, like they used to. Problem is, you can't do that and do an entire women's tournament all in the same night. That would be 16 matches. Without any buys or anything, 16 matches just for the tournament alone. You know, even on those King of the Ring pay-per-views, initially, they at least had a title match. They had other matches on the undercard. You're not going to have 2 complete tournaments in one night with 16 matches. 16 match, or as I call it, an AEW pay-per-view. You're not going to do that. So that means it would probably be semifinals and finals only for each one. I think the days of the one-night tournament are done. You know, they have more television time to fill these days than they did back then. You know, 25 years ago, 30 years ago. And television is where they make their money now. It's not pay-per-view. You know, the world has changed. So why not blow it up? Blow it up big. With a big bracket, March Madness style, maybe over a period of weeks. And then you kind of whittle it down to the semis and the finals on the actual pay-per-view. You can have it replace Money in the Bank, with the winners being able to challenge for the title of their choosing at SummerSlam. That's the way that I would work it. When I say replace Money in the Bank, I don't mean getting rid of the Money in the Bank concept. I mean replacing Money in the Bank as its own standalone pay-per-view. So that way, you know, the tournament has real stakes to it beyond just wearing a fucking plastic crown on their head and making it, you know, the title of their choosing. Not only does that create some intrigue about which championship they might go after, but it doesn't lock WWE into a situation where if they want to put over a star on the rise, let's just say someone like Carmelo Hayes, right? Eventually, you know, 6 months from now, 9 months from now, he's called up. He's on Raw or he's on SmackDown. Maybe it's someone like him. Maybe it's a mid-carder, right? It doesn't lock them into a world championship match that they don't want to do. SummerSlam is their second biggest show of the year. They have a big main event already in mind that year, let's say. Look who our last King of the Ring winner was. Xavier Woods. Xavier Woods is not going to SummerSlam in the main event to challenge for the World Championship. On no fucking planet is that going to happen. But you need to have something on the line. I honestly, I am sick of the Money in the Bank concept. I think that the whole concept has been played out for so long, but people still like it. So bring it back as a WrestleMania staple. It does not need to be its own pay-per-view anymore, but you can do the Money in the Bank stuff at WrestleMania. You do a men's Money in the Bank match on night 1, you do a women's Money in the Bank match on night 2, or vice versa, it doesn't matter. But you separate them, you have one on each night, and that would be the way to go. Now, Meltzer says one of the changes they're making, in addition to that, potentially, is doing fewer gimmick pay-per-views, which would be a welcome change. That would be a positive change. Get rid of the Money in the Bank pay-per-view, get rid of the Hell in a Cell pay-per-view, get rid of the TLC pay-per-view. We don't need them. Extreme Rules, I could take it or leave it. If it's up to me, my preference, get rid of that too. You've got the Royal Rumble, you've got WrestleMania, you've got King of the Ring, you've got SummerSlam, you've got Survivor Series with War Games now. And in the months in between, they could use names like Backlash, like No Way Out, like Unforgiven. They already own the IP. You may as well use it. I want Halloween Havoc as a main roster show, not an NXT show. Shawn Michaels was on the conference call before the NXT Halloween Havoc show this week. He says his goal is to make it so that when people think of Halloween Havoc, they no longer think of WCW, they start thinking of NXT. Yeah, I mean, if you have new fans who don't even know what WCW is, then of course they're going to look at it as an NXT show. It's nice to have goals in life. No longtime wrestling fan is ever going to look at NXT Halloween Havoc and think, oh, it's the NXT show, as opposed to the WCW show. That's ridiculous. Halloween Havoc should be a main roster show. And I still think Triple H is going to find a way to bring back Starrcade in place of what would have been Day One, which looks to be canceled, although they still have not made that announcement official. But it looks like the Day One pay-per-view is canceled. In fact, I think something changed the date of the show, or where they were going to be doing the show in Atlanta, I think, has moved to a different date. So Day One is not happening. And I still think Triple H may give us Starrcade in December as a replacement. But, you know, you have all those shows. You've still got the 2 annual Saudi Arabia shows. You probably have an annual UK Stadium show. It sounds like they want to go back there every year and do a UK show. There you go. There it is. There's your pay-per-view schedule. I just filled it out for you. Now, WWE is already making plans for the 30th anniversary of Monday Night Raw in January, and according to WrestleVotes on Twitter, before Triple H even started as the head of creative, there were already plans to do the show from the place where it all began, the Manhattan Center in New York City. It was at least an idea on the table. Nothing was set in stone, but even when Vince McMahon was still there, it was something that was already being discussed. And WrestleVotes said he wasn't sure if that's still the case, but that, you know, potentially it could be. And I think it should be. Absolutely should be. Raw at the Manhattan Center would be great. They went back there for the 25th anniversary. Unfortunately, they didn't give those people in the building much to cheer for. They were doing it from different locations. They were at the Barclays Center for part of the night. They were at the Manhattan Center. They had Jim Ross and Jerry Lawler sitting there looking like they were fucking sleeping at their announce desk. You do the entire show, 30th anniversary of Monday Night Raw, back from the place where it all started. That is absolutely the way to go. They got to bring it back there. I think Triple H will do it up the right way. I think it'll be a nice homage to where they started. And I also, frankly, I think it's nice to just get out of that comfort zone that you're in. You know, you have the same LED set, the same look, the same feel to Monday Night Raw every single week. When Triple H took over, when they had the season premiere a few weeks ago, there were people hoping, oh, we're going to get new music and we're going to get a new set. You know how much that set cost them? Millions of dollars. So they're not interested in replacing it with a brand new set. They're going to get another fucking 5 or 10 years out of that thing. But wouldn't it be nice every now and then? WCW used to do this. They would have like a spring break show from a different location, right? I'm not saying it has to be spring break, but, you know, have Raw every now and then, even if it's smaller, even if it means you can't sell as many tickets, jack up the fucking prices. But just do Raw from maybe a smaller, more intimate, kind of unique location. The Manhattan Center, I know they've said, is not a great location for TV. But as an anniversary show, one time, I think it would be a great idea. And I'd like to see them do more of those shows a few times throughout the year. Get out of your comfort zone, get out of the usual buildings that you're in, and play to a different audience somewhere else. Look, the Manhattan Center isn't just the Grand Ballroom upstairs, which is where I presume they would be doing Raw. Downstairs, on the first level of the Manhattan Center, is the Hammerstein Ballroom. And I don't believe WWE has run a Hammerstein show since that one episode of ECW that they did where the crowd completely shit on Batista and Big Show. I think that was the last time they ran that venue. You know, GCW ran it at the beginning of the year in January. They did their big show, which sucked. But absolutely, they should be back at the Manhattan Center. On Raw Monday night, Bobby Lashley got his revenge on Brock Lesnar, laid him out, made their match official for Crown Jewel in Saudi Arabia. My only hope, if they go out there and they have the kind of match I was hoping to see them have in January at the Royal Rumble. That was a disappointing match. Even though Bobby got the win, he won the championship in that match. But that was more of a kind of an angle to set up the Heyman stuff. I think this is a chance for them to go out there. And in a way, this is what happened with Bobby Lashley and Bill Goldberg. Because if you remember Lashley and Goldberg at SummerSlam, when they had their SummerSlam match a few years ago, which really is where they should have done the Big E cash-in. But they did Goldberg and they did Bobby Lashley. And then they went and they did a rematch in Saudi Arabia. The match at SummerSlam was no good. The match in Saudi Arabia was much better. So they kind of redeemed themselves with that match. That was where they did the spot at the end where Goldberg, I think, speared him off the stage. And they did this big fall. But that was actually a much better match. I'm kind of hoping it follows the same formula here. Right? Their match at the beginning of the year, not all that great. Now they can go out there, hopefully, and have a better showing. The other thing on Raw Monday night was the return of JBL, who came back. He had a segment on SmackDown a long time ago that I honestly completely forgot about, where JBL's limo pulled up in the back, and we never saw JBL, but Baron Corbin had been on this losing streak. And the door swung open, and Baron Corbin went in the limo, he drove off. I haven't even thought about Baron Corbin since. I have not had Baron Corbin on the brain since that last segment they shot on SmackDown. So JBL here was back, and he he introduced Baron Corbin as the modern-day wrestling god. He used to call himself the wrestling god. Now, Baron Corbin apparently is the modern-day wrestling god. And God then wrestled Dolph Ziggler. That was the first match that we got with this new and improved Baron Corbin. Now look, it's hard for me to bring myself to give a shit about anything that they're doing with Baron Corbin. I don't hate the pairing. If the plan is to make it permanent and not just a one-week thing, I mean, for all I know, JBL may not be back on TV this week. You know, they had him on Monday, he anointed him, maybe we're not going to see him again. But if the idea is for him to be there every week as his new manager, I think that's fine. What I like more, though, is the fact that we got a trade. I like how they even took the time to explain to us that, you know, Rey Mysterio went to SmackDown, and as a result of Rey going to SmackDown, because Rey was going to quit, and to please him, Triple H said, look, why don't we do this? And he ended up moving him over to SmackDown to get him away from the Judgment Day. But because Raw lost someone, and SmackDown gained, it made sense that SmackDown would lose somebody and Raw would gain. Now, I don't know that that's not an equal trade. I know Rey's a lot older than Corbin is, but to trade Rey Mysterio for Baron Corbin is not exactly a win for Monday Night Raw. But at least they took the time to explain. Now, if they do more stuff like this in the future, it would make sense for the shows to have general managers. You know, when Triple H holds his first draft next year, which he will, and the time to do it is going to be right after WrestleMania. That would be a good time to designate a GM for each show. You know, the GM concept was so played out. I was so done with it a few years ago. But it's been long enough now that if they want to treat the brand split as more of an actual brand split, then it makes sense to have one for Raw, and have one person for SmackDown, and have one person representing NXT. And for NXT, that person should be Shawn Michaels, since he's basically already doing that. Now, Seth Rollins beat Matt Riddle to retain his United States Championship off of an unintended assist from Elias. Elias is back. Hold your applause. Quite the downgrade for Riddle, since it looks like he's going to be working either as partners or probably a feud with Elias. I just laughed because, again, he won the fight pit. And now Rollins is the U.S. champion, and Riddle looks like he's going to be feuding with Elias. Rollins is going to be working a match I don't know about a program, but at least a match with Mustafa Ali. Ali went after him on Monday. My guess is, you know, they'll do that match at Crown Jewel. Look, Ali was done dirty by the Retribution stuff. Somebody else was done dirty by the Retribution stuff too, and I'm going to be talking about him in a little bit. But Ali was done dirty by that whole thing, and even before that, you know, he had that eye injury in the match on SmackDown with Randy Orton that took him out of the Elimination Chamber at a time when it looked like he was starting to build some real momentum. It took him right out of the game. And he just hasn't been the same since. And I want to see the guy succeed. He's got all the tools in the ring. He just hasn't put it together character-wise yet. Crowd's not buying him. He comes out, he doesn't get great reactions. This probably will not be much more than a short program and one great match in Saudi, but I would love for Ali to carve out a spot for himself in the middle of the card. I think that's the best he can hope for, but at least if he's getting consistent television time, then maybe he'll start to get over. If he's going to make an appearance once or twice and then disappear for 3 weeks, how are you supposed to get over? It's one of the issues I have with AEW and some of the people that we don't see. And it's not just Miro. I mean, there are other people like that too. You see them once or twice, they vanish. How are you supposed to get over? On SmackDown, we saw the Bloodline take out Sheamus in an angle after the opening match. It was Sheamus against Solo Sikoa. They injured his arm. The storyline injury, it's a non-displaced fracture near his elbow. So here's the deal on this. Sheamus is getting married soon. So it looks like this is a way to explain him taking probably, I would guess, just a few weeks off of television. I don't think it's going to be that long. And the reason is, this angle that they shot here, I mean, you know, they did this to get him off TV, but we're so close now to Survivor Series. This felt to me like the first shot being fired for War Games next month. You got the Bloodline on one side. On the other side, you've got the Brawling Brutes. Maybe with Drew McIntyre and Kevin Owens, but, you know, really, you can pretty much slide any two baby faces into those two spots. Anybody who has been wronged by Roman Reigns and the Bloodline could conceivably be slid into that spot. McIntyre and KO, KO given the Sami Zayn connection. Those are the two names that would make the most sense to me. But that's what I think that was on Friday. Not just a way to get Sheamus off TV for him to go get hitched, but I think it was the first shot as far as setting up the War Games match next month. Now, we also had Bray Wyatt on the show. We had a big cliffhanger the week before where Bray was in the ring cutting a promo as himself. And then the lights went out. We had the Uncle Howdy video pop up on the screen. How would they follow that up? Well, they followed it up in a couple of different ways. We had Bray in the back, again, dressed, street clothes, just dressed as himself. And he apologized for last week. He didn't get to finish what he was saying, but he said, I'll finish it now. And he said, I used to say that revenge is a confession of pain. And it is. He says, I still believe that. I feel like confessing some things to you guys right now. I confess that I have problems. I know I've always had problems, but there's a few problems that I have had, like anger. Sometimes it can take me to places that I don't want to be. But for whatever reason, I get chances that most people don't get. I was okay with being left alone and you not chanting my name and asking for me to come back, but I'm glad that you did, because I needed it. I needed all of you. You pulled the spears from my body and pulled me up. You showed me what I'm supposed to do. I am thankful for that because now I can see. And then he said, I know who you are. I know what you are. I know what you're trying to do, but it won't work. I confess that along this journey, I'm going to do some horrible, horrible things, but I will never feel sorry for them. I am just a servant now. I go where the circle takes me. Now, when he says, I know who you are, I know what you are, and I know what you're trying to do, but it's not going to work, I think he's addressing the man in the mask, right? Uncle Howdy, who I think represents his dark side. I think that's the whole idea here, is that this whole, there's probably somebody under that mask. And again, it's the same mask that Bray himself was wearing at Extreme Rules when he came back. Pulled the mask off and showed himself, because I think it represents his dark side. He's trying to keep that buried. But it was also interesting, him telling the fans in that promo, I just wanted to be left alone. But you brought me back. I read that as whatever happens now is on our heads. We're responsible for whatever happens now. So which babyface does he take out? Because I think that's where this is headed. You want to know who Bray's going to work with first? Who's his first match or program going to be? I think it's going to be with a fan favorite. Now, we were introduced to Uncle Howdy on this show. In another video piece later in the show, it looked like a person wearing some kind of latex mask. The cheeks were, clearly detached from the person's face. And whoever it is could be heard saying over and over again, you should never lie to the ones you love. You should never lie to the ones you love. We got a new QR code in that video. And the QR code links to Bray's leaked psychological profile. It's a form. Part of it is redacted, but it's from an unspecified time. There's no date on it other than his birthday. And there's a client ID number in the corner. Client ID number doubles as a phone number. And when you call that phone number, you get a recording of someone reciting part of the lyrics to the David Bowie song, which Nirvana did a cover of, called The Man Who Sold the World. It says, oh no, not me, I never lost control. Oh no, not me, we never lost control. Apparently, Uncle Howdy is unaware of the HIPAA laws in this country, putting this form out there. But in the psychological profile, it states that Bray has difficulty showing remorse or empathy and has conflict with social norms, also disregarding or violating the rights of others. That's not the Bray that we saw in the ring last week. But maybe Uncle Howdy is trying to show how full of shit Bray really is. That this is the real Bray Wyatt, not the man who stood in the ring last week talking about how much the fans meant to him. And also, let's not forget, when they took out the trademark on the Uncle Howdy name, they also took out a trademark on the name Uncle Harper. So Uncle Harper is coming. Now maybe it's the angel and the devil type deal, where Uncle Howdy is the evil one and Uncle Harper is the good one. Everyone has their own theories, which is what makes it fun. Bray has everybody wondering what all of this means. Nobody has it figured out. If you think you have it figured out, you are probably wrong. But that is my theory about what we saw and where I think things are headed. And we'll get the next chapter on SmackDown on Friday. It's actually one of the things I look forward to now each week, is to see where is this going. Where is this story going? Is he even going to wrestle? For all we know, we could still be talking about these segments in 3 months and say, wait a minute, Bray hasn't even wrestled yet. Maybe he's just going to do a bunch of promos and cinematic skits. Maybe that's all he has to do. But at some point, there's obviously got to be a payoff to all this. Now let's move over to AEW, because there were some developments this week. Finally, more than 6 weeks after the media scrum at Brawlout, we are now starting to see some of the fallout. Which means that if there is an investigation, and we still have no evidence there actually is one, it may be just about wrapping up. Dave Meltzer was first to report that Ace Steel is gone from AEW. He was released on Monday for his role in the backstage incident where he is alleged to have hit Nick Jackson in the face with a chair and bit Kenny Omega on the arm. Kenny had visible bite marks on his arm after that. All while defending his best friend, CM Punk, and/or his own wife, depending on which version of the story you believe. His wife, Lucy, was said to be in the locker room when all of this went down. She was in there looking after Punk's dog, Larry. Since they were in Chicago, Punk brought his dog to the show. She had a broken foot at the time, and so one version was that Ace was just defending his wife. I said from the get-go, at a minimum, Ace Steel had to go. The guy threw a fucking chair at one of the EVPs of the company and bit another EVP on the arm, like a dog. There was an actual dog in the room. Apparently Larry was on his best behavior. I can't say the same for Ace Steel. But he had no chance of surviving this. He was going to fall no matter. It's like the whole Johnny Ace thing all over again. When all the news came out about Vince McMahon and Johnny Ace and the hush money and the investigation that the board of directors was overseeing, you knew that no matter what came out of this, whether Vince stayed or whether Vince went, and I sit here now months later, I'm still shocked that Vince McMahon ended up walking away. I'm still shocked by that. But the one thing that I said from day one, Johnny Ace is not going to survive this. Johnny Ace is the low-hanging fruit. He was going to be gone no matter what. I felt the same way here about Ace Steel. No matter what happens with CM Punk, with the Bucks, with Omega, you had to know that Ace Steel was not going to survive this. Naturally, it makes you wonder if they let go of CM Punk's best friend, his trainer, what does that mean for Punk's future in AEW? Doesn't look like he has a future in AEW. Meltzer says Punk and AEW are in talks about his future, but right now it looks doubtful that he will be back. Those with close knowledge of the situation said the company is in talks with Punk about a buyout of the remaining years on his contract, which is a sign that Punk is all but gone. If they're talking about buying him out, this guy is as good as gone. The holdup right now is said to be the non-compete period, and if they're talking about a non-compete, that means AEW wants to protect against Punk going back to WWE. And for all the people who mock the idea, and who think there's no chance of that happening. Not only is there a chance of that happening, after the backstage show on Fox was canceled, WWE reached out to Punk about a possible return, and he listened to what they had to say. He did not say no. Now, the talks never really went anywhere. He still had issues with them playing games, as he said. But the fact that they even reached out, and the fact that he listened to what they had to say tells you cannot ever close the door on the possibility of Punk going back to WWE. Tony Khan knows that, which is why I'm sure he wants to make sure there is a lengthy non-compete. If the situation unfolds where they buy out Punk's contract, he wants to make sure he can't just waltz into WWE. And if CM Punk is going to wrestle again, outside of maybe an indie shot here and there, if he signs a contract anywhere, the only place that he is going to sign with is WWE, because nobody else can afford to pay him what WWE is going to pay him. I said this right after the scrum. CM Punk has to go. He had to go. Omega and the Bucks had to be stripped of their EVP titles. They shouldn't have active talent as EVPs in the company anyway. They should be stripped of more than just their trios titles. But those early stories of them kicking in the door to Punk's dressing room, that was all nonsense. The story seems to be that they entered with the company's chief legal officer. They brought her along because they wanted to make sure legally they covered their asses. And the other consistent part of all these stories is that Punk was the one who threw the first punch. But unless we get a blow-by-blow from their supposed investigation, which we won't, we're never going to know for sure. Nobody will ever know for sure, except the people who were in the room. Nobody will ever know for sure exactly what happened and what the exact sequence of events were. But Punk had to go. Even before any punches were thrown, just for the things he said and the way he acted at the media scrum and how much of a chump he made his boss look like. A boss, by the way, who bent over backwards for him to give him everything he ever wanted. He was on Tony Khan's wish list when he started AEW. Tony Khan has said this. Punk was the number one name on his wish list that he wanted to get in that company. He was going to do whatever it took to get CM Punk to sign. Eventually he got him. He didn't get him on day one, but eventually he got him. He gave this guy everything he ever wanted. Punk did more damage to the company in that scrum than any punch that was thrown backstage. And the sentiment among a lot of the talent behind the scenes is said to be decidedly anti-Punk. Especially the things that he said about Hangman Page, because they like Hangman. Hangman is well liked. He goes out there and calls Hangman a dumb fuck who never did anything in the business. This is the guy who was pushed as a top star in the company. And a former AEW world champion. And Punk is going out there going, yeah, this guy never did shit. He made the entire company look bad. And he made the entire night about him and his personal problems, when it should have been about what a great show they put on that night. He went in there with an agenda. He had a whole plan in mind, and when, Nick Hausman didn't kind of play along, when he asked Nick Hausman, aren't you friends with him? Aren't you friends with Scott Colton? Oh, as a matter of fact, I'm not. Oh, well, okay, well, I'll go on my rant anyway. He went in there with an agenda. He made it all about him and his own personal problems. Fightful had a report saying several backstage talents stated they weren't interested in working in the same locker room with Punk. They would only work with him if he made significant amends after his actions at the scrum. I don't know about you. I can't see CM Punk coming back on bended knee to apologize. That ain't going to happen. You cannot have this man back in that locker room. By letting him go, Tony Khan is sending a message that even if you are a huge star, and for AEW, he is their biggest star. He is to them what Roman Reigns is right now to WWE, just as far as his place in the pecking order. That it doesn't matter who you are, you cannot behave like that. If you do, there are consequences. It's an amazing fall from grace. Punk came back at the United Center. He got a hero's welcome, one of the greatest comebacks in wrestling history as far as crowd reactions. That's how loud it was. That's how genuinely happy those people were to see that man back on TV after 7 years away. People were crying. I was happy to see CM Punk back. I'm not a CM Punk hater. I was very happy to see him back. It was great to see him back on TV and get him feuding with MJF. That was the number one feud I wanted to see when he first came back. And think of all the new faces that he had, to work with. 7 years he was away. All the new faces he had to work with, and some that he already did. We never did get that Bryan Danielson rematch that I know he wanted. But Tony Khan gave this man the keys to the castle. He might have even given him an office job. He may have given him more than the keys. He may have given him his own office. He let that one slip by accident during the interview with Ariel Helwani. The one thing Tony did share with Ariel, and he did it by accident, was that Punk may have also had some kind of executive role in the company. We're not sure. But, he worked that great program with MJF. They never completed their story. It should have been Punk doing the honors for MJF and dropping the title to him at Full Gear, not Jon Moxley. They put the championship on him. He got hurt. They had to change their summer plans. He came back, he lost the title, won it right back, got hurt again, which forced them to change their fall plans. Although that wasn't the only thing that forced them to change their fall plans. But even if the scrum didn't go down the way that it did, Punk got hurt. So, right away, unless Tony wanted another interim champion for 8 fucking months, they were going to have to take the belt off him. And again, it ruined all of their fall plans. What should have been the summer of Punk turned into the fall of Punk, literally. He was gifted the opportunity of a lifetime, and he got paid very well to do it. And what did he do? He turned around and took a giant shit all over them. Now it looks like they're going to pay him just to go away. They probably can't outright fire him because of the Bucks getting involved the way they did. That's probably where all the legal threats are coming from, or the fear of possible, legal fallout. So they'll pay him. They'll pay him to go away. And the ultimate indignity for CM Punk would be for him to go crawling back to WWE after all of the shit that he has said about them, all the digs that he's taken about WrestleMania being a buy one, get one extravaganza, and if they had, if they bought Ring of Honor, it would just end up as a tab on a shitty app and the boys wouldn't get paid for it, which is true, by the way. Had they bought Ring of Honor, it would be a tab on Peacock. But all of the things that he has said about them for so long, for him to go crawling back after all of that, what a massive hypocrite he would come across as. Now, would Triple H take him back? I think Triple H, to borrow a phrase from The Authority, would do what he thinks would be best for business. And Vince McMahon would do the same. Vince McMahon brought back plenty of people he had a falling out with. In some cases, it was actually Triple H who helped broker the deal. If Triple H thought that he could get CM Punk, I think he would meet with him, and yes, I think that he would make that deal. If they could come to terms, I think they would make that deal. He's still a big name, and I would imagine Triple H knows that Fox would probably love to have Punk back on TV. They loved having him on FS1 for the backstage show. They would love to get CM Punk on SmackDown. So that's not the question. People asking the question, would WWE take him back? Would he go back? Like, you're asking the wrong question. That's not the question. The question is it worth it? The guy has been made of glass. 2 major injuries in the span of 3 months. Can he even stay healthy long enough to make a difference? And is it worth bringing back someone with that kind of baggage? Who's to say that he wouldn't do the same thing to Triple H at some point that he did to Tony Khan? And he actually likes Tony, or he liked him anyway. And he still did what he did. Imagine what he would do working for the idiotic daughter and the doofus son-in-law. Do not dismiss the idea of him going back to WWE. It absolutely could happen, but it's not worth the drama for Triple H. I would say thanks, but no thanks. Hangman Page was injured in his championship match with Jon Moxley at the end of Tuesday's Dynamite. Moxley hit him with a King Kong lariat, turned him inside out, and he didn't turn completely. Landed on his head, face down on the mat. He wasn't moving. Referee Paul Turner checked on him right away, waved over for the ringside doctor, and after checking on him, they stopped the match. They awarded the win to Moxley. It was scary because, my first thought, probably like a lot of yours, was that it was a neck injury, based on the way he landed. But it ended up being a concussion only, which could be just as bad depending on the severity of it. He's said to be feeling fine, which is great, but he's in concussion protocol, and that could be for a week, or that could be for months. I mean, just look at how long it's been since we've seen Adam Cole. They kept the camera off of him the rest of the time while they strapped him to a gurney. They loosened the bottom rope to get him out of the ring. AEW released a statement after midnight saying Hangman Adam Page was taken tonight by medical personnel to a Cincinnati trauma center and diagnosed with a concussion. He was discharged but will remain in AEW's concussion protocol. AEW and Hangman Page are grateful for the exemplary response and care of staff and local medical personnel and are appreciative of the love and support of fans everywhere. They still had 8 minutes to kill until the end of the show, so they were scrambling. Moxley cut an impromptu promo in the ring, then he called out MJF, which was, I have to think, the planned ending for the show. MJF came out, he announced that he will be cashing in his poker chip for a championship match at Full Gear. He called his shot, he said that he's going to earn it when he wins it. Very much a babyface-esque promo. This came after an outstanding promo segment earlier in the night with MJF and William Regal. This is the best that I have ever seen on AEW television. In the 3 years of Dynamite, you will not find a better in-ring promo segment than the one we got with those two on Dynamite this week. And I'll just sum it up for you. I'm not going to read verbatim everything that was said, but just it's important, I think, to kind of go back over this here because it just adds a new layer to the MJF character and his motivation and why he is the way he is and why he has a chip on his shoulder. He said that when he was 19 years old, he got pulled over by his trainers and told him, hey, we got you some extra work for WWE. WWE's coming to Brooklyn. So he packed his gear and his suit. He drove to the Barclays Center. He and the extras met with William Regal, who told them they were all going to have tryout matches. After his match, Regal pulled him aside and told him, hey kid, you've got 3 minutes to sell yourself to me. And that's what he did. And at the end of it, Regal told him that he was going to get him a job, until Regal asked him, hey, how old are you? And MJF told him he was 19. And Regal said, I'm sorry, son, you're much too young. But Regal told him, I don't like to put my name on many people, but when I do, they get jobs. By the way, that's hilarious to me because we have Cora Jade and Roxanne Perez. I think Roxanne is 20. Like, they hire them so young now. This is not that long ago, but it's hilarious to me, if this is a real story. So he said, Regal told him, look, I don't like to put my name on many people, but when I do, they get jobs here. When you finally come of age, I'll personally put my name on you, but until then, I want you to go home, I want you to work your ass off, and every month, I want you to send me a match and a promo. So he went home, and that's what he did. Regal responded in month 1, thank you so much, I look forward to reviewing your progress. Month 2, thank you so much, I look forward to reviewing your progress. In month 3, Regal sent him an email that he has saved to his phone. He says he still looks at it every single day. He says, Max, I'm a very busy man. I've got talent from all over the world to watch, and I've just had to sit for a minute watching you show your acting skills. Do not reply to this, but would this make me say, or how would this make me say, oh, I know, let's hire Max. He said, make a name for yourself in the wrestling world and you'll get noticed. That means being a high-level performer, and when you do, trust me, I'll know. Unfortunately for you, the game has changed. WWE hires only the best talents in the world. When you're one of them, then maybe send me your stuff. Yours sincerely, William Regal. And MJF said that when he read that email, he wanted to quit the wrestling business and kill himself. But then he realized if he did that, he'd be giving in to all the naysayers, and he couldn't do that. And so here we are now in 2022, and he called Regal nothing more than a sad, withered old man who got fired. Now he's snuck into his company like a flea-ridden rat by sticking to talents far better than he ever was. And he's MJF, right? The man that his former employer would kill for in the bidding war of 2024. He had the entire arena in Cincinnati, Jon Moxley's hometown, the man he is going to be challenging for the championship. He had the entire arena chanting his name and cheering for him by the time this was over. And that was just MJF's half of the segment. Then it was Regal's turn. And he talked about how, you talked about being 19 and being a child. When I was 16, I left home. I went to go work at a carnival. I had to fight grown men to get into this industry. And he said, I wasn't trying to cast you aside. I saw somebody who was going to be a big star. I wanted to light a fire under you because we live in an age when you can't have grown men smashing people's faces in when they're 16 years old. And when you're 17 and crying every single night with blood running out of every hole in your body, which is quite the visual, and you want to quit and you won't let yourself because it's 17, I said, no, I will not quit because I'm going to be a professional wrestler. And he says, if a bloody email is what it took for, you to get to where you are now, then you've had it easy. He says, before you were born, I was insulting Mr. Schiavone, but I would never lay a hand on him. I'm what they call an ODV, an ordinary decent villain. Anyone who steps between these ropes is fair game, but you never put your hands on someone like Mr. Schiavone. The only problem is you've let me down, you've taken shortcuts. Just because you're making lots of money, that doesn't prove a damn thing to me. And he said, look, if you want to be the devil, beat everybody who stands in front of you. I don't care what liberties you take, just get to that place. But if you want to be the devil, show the world right now. He turned his back and he gave MJF a shot. He said, go ahead, take your shot. And you could tell he wanted to. He wanted to take a shot at him, but MJF held back. And Regal said, you still have a lot to prove. And he left the ring. I don't know how much of what MJF said is true. Usually these things, there's truth mixed in with fiction. I'm sure it's been embellished. But I'm also sure that some of it was true. And they found a way to weave it into this current storyline to explain his motivations, which I thought was great. But it was also a great babyface promo. I said that on the stream the other night, and some people disagreed and said, no, it wasn't a babyface. No, this right here is a sign of what you are going to see in the future from MJF as the top babyface in AEW. And he said at the end of the show, I challenge you at Full Gear, but I'm going to earn it. Now, maybe he's a dick, and he's going to go to Full Gear, and he's going to fucking cheat. He says, I'm going to earn it, I'm going to do it the right way, and then in the end, he fucking cheats. Right? And he proves to everybody what an asshole he really is. Maybe that's what's going to end up happening, but there's not a doubt in my mind, and Chris Jericho said the same thing at the media scrum last month. He's had conversations with MJF about this because MJF has gone to him and said, I don't want to be a babyface. And Jericho said, it's not your choice. The fans are going to will you into being a babyface, very similar to what they did with Steve Austin. Steve Austin never wanted to be a babyface. He didn't know how to work as a babyface. But that's what he became. He became one of the biggest babyfaces of all time. MJF could be exactly in the same situation. But that segment was absolute gold. And now we have our official main event for Full Gear. I mentioned Jericho. Chris Jericho was in the news this week. Variety broke the story on Tuesday that Chris Jericho, the former AEW World Champion and current Ring of Honor World Champion, has signed a contract extension with the company that will keep him there through 2025. Meltzer said that it's not really an extension, it's a totally new deal. His initial deal with the company was set to expire in January of 2024. He'll be on his existing deal until the first week in January. The new deal will then kick in, and it will expire in January of 2026. Jericho commented on this. He said, I guess the simple answer is, why not? Things have been going so well in the company, and I really do feel this is my company. It's tattooed on my heart, so to speak. I've been here since day one, and there's really no reason not to be here going forward. When AEW first started, I think basically it was Chris Jericho and a group of very talented people that might not have been as well known. Within 3 months, that changed, and now within 3 years, we've got at least a dozen, maybe 2 dozen of our own homegrown stars that came into their own on AEW TV. And so, like Jon Moxley, with his new deal, Jericho is also going to be increasing his responsibilities. He's going to serve as a producer and a creative advisor, in addition to continuing to mentor young talent. The reality is this, and Jericho can talk about this in kayfabe or whatever, there would be no AEW without Chris Jericho. That is not an exaggeration. This company would not exist without Chris Jericho. He was one of the most important building blocks for Tony Khan in starting this entire thing. And Tony has said before that it was Jericho's match with Kenny Omega at Wrestle Kingdom in 2018. Alpha versus Omega, big match, right? And how successful it was. How many subscriptions it added to New Japan World. That's what really was the genesis for this whole idea of there even being an AEW. Jericho was said to be a positive presence backstage after the whole Brawl Out situation. He stepped up. He and Jon Moxley and Bryan Danielson, they all stepped up to be the real locker room leaders after that all went down. And since they put that ROH title on him, Jericho has had a string of good matches on TV. Just had one the other night with Dalton Castle. He had one with Bandito. He's been going nonstop ever since he beat Claudio to win that ROH title. I think Moxley has been the MVP for this company this year, but locking him up and Jericho up is a big, big move for Tony Khan. And look, it just psychologically, it shows the rest of the roster. These guys are not interested in going anywhere else because the tide has turned. Vince McMahon went away. Triple H has taken over. WWE all of a sudden has a lot more goodwill with the fans than they did even 6 months ago. And so all the buzz now is not about how AEW is so great or AEW is an alternative to the crappy creative in WWE. It's amazing how things have flipped. The only buzz around AEW right now is about who's getting into a fight next. Who's gonna be in a brawl next in the back? Who's gonna be the next unhappy person to start tweeting cryptic shit about wanting to leave the company? WWE has all this goodwill. Triple H is still in the honeymoon phase here. Psychologically, this is huge because it shows the rest of the roster, we want to be here. And if they wanted to, they could have waited. They could have played both companies against each other for more money. They easily could have done that. AEW has their TV rights negotiations coming up next year for 2024. If they can get a big increase, that's more money they could have paid to retain both of these guys. And they both said, I'm not waiting, I want to sign now. That's a big statement. So they have Jericho locked down through the start of 2026, and Moxley is locked down through, I think, all of 2027. Jericho is eventually going to go back to WWE. He'll get his Hall of Fame induction. It could be 5 years from now. It could be 7 years from now. It could be 4 years from now at the very end of this deal. Eventually, he'll migrate back there. Maybe not for a full run, but, do I see him having a match? Do I see him having a Hall of Fame induction? Yes, eventually that will happen. Moxley, though, honest to God, I don't think he cares. I think that Jon Moxley would be perfectly content to just never go back to WWE, even though Vince is not there anymore. I think he would be perfectly content to just be with AEW, do stuff with New Japan, work the occasional indie shot. They want him for a Shield Hall of Fame induction in 10 years. Maybe he'll go back for that. But Jericho, I do see going back at some point. Now, Tony Khan did an interview with Sports Illustrated, and he said that very soon there would be great news about weekly ROH television. He said, or I shouldn't say television. He said weekly ROH shows. There's still no indication of exactly where that will air. But he did say that we will have great news soon about Ring of Honor weekly shows. The success of Death Before Dishonor on pay-per-view has ensured that there will be more Ring of Honor pay-per-views. Our goal is to have one more great pay-per-view for ROH in 2022, and then follow that up with a weekly show in 2023. Later on, we learned that Ring of Honor is going to be holding its Final Battle pay-per-view on Saturday, December 10th. That's going to be in Arlington, Texas, 4 o'clock Eastern. So they're running earlier in the day to avoid the UFC pay-per-view that night. It's UFC 282. I would imagine that 10 p.m. I mean, they have the prelims, but the actual pay-per-view is at 10. But NXT is also running its next big show that day, calling it NXT Deadline at 8 p.m. So there shouldn't be any overlap with any of them, but that is going to be a very busy day. AEW is set to begin filming a new documentary series starting next month. Warner Brothers Discovery is moving ahead with a behind-the-scenes series focused on AEW that will follow several wrestlers around backstage. I like that first Fight Club movie, so this should be good. This might be more Battle Royale than Fight Club. According to a report from Fightful Select, AEW staff and talent were informed this past week that the filming for the project will begin on November 2nd when Dynamite comes to Baltimore. It will continue for 6 weeks until the Winter is Coming episode of Dynamite on December 14th in Garland, Texas. And Tony Khan will serve as the executive producer and referee. The project will be a collaboration between Warner Brothers Discovery and Shed Media, and it is expected to air sometime in 2023. Always dangerous to follow the talents around backstage, especially lately.